All right. Next talk is from someone who is really special, is really part of the community, and it's a great contributor of many, many modules that we use in the community too. Let's welcome Mo with Introduction to Agregore.
Sorry, just figuring out the webcam stream. Cool. Thank you for the warm welcome, Diego. I really appreciate it. It's been really fun kind of doing stuff with the community over the past couple of years, something like that. Hello. Today I'm going to be talking about my web browser, Agregore, since, we haven't had enough web browsers in the conference so far. So just a quick intro for the recording. I'm Mauve, everywhere that matters. I'm at Ranger Mauve, so follow me on Twitter and the such. I do peer-to-peer stuff, and I usually do that through my consulting company, Mauve Software Inc. So if you're interested in developing some sort of peer-to-peer thing, hit me up in like a couple months because I'm way too busy. So today we're going to look at kind of this web browser and why it exists and what the goals are of it. But before I do that, let's just quickly look at what kind of the state of DAT on the web has been for the past while. So kind of the most obvious and most popular DAT web thing is, of course, Beaker. And honestly, that's kind of the thing that got me super into that in the first place. So it's just like the idea of having a web browser and then just being able to author content and load it over this peer-to-peer network without having to use any servers was like super exciting, which is really cool. But one limitation was that it's a new browser and it didn't work on other places in the web. So I started searching around and messing around with how do I get like the existing DAT content on the web. And so I started working with DAT Gateway. And also there's a similar thing with the HTTP proxy flag in the DAT CLI. So that was cool because now we can load DAT content in regular websites. But that wasn't as nice as an actual web browser, and because it wasn't actually peer-to-peer. So another cool project that's in the ecosystem is the DAT web extension by Sam Macbeth. And so that is a Firefox extension which supports both the old DAT protocol and the new Hypercore protocol stuff. And it's wild because here's just like a standard browser running this peer-to-peer code, which is cool. But now there's this limitation of you need to use Firefox nightly and you need special flags, and it's kind of a pain to set up sometimes. And then finally, another thing I've been playing around with is how to get applications on kind of the legacy web using DAT. And that was kind of the goals of the DAT SDK project, in that you can take the same code that you'd run in Node.js or Electron, and then take it and compile it for the web. And suddenly you can load pretty much the same hyperdrives and hypercores, and it works great. Except the fine print is it's using proxies under the hood and isn't as local first as it could be. Like, it'll work offline, but you can't use like local Wi-Fi networks to connect to others. And the peer-to-peer portions use WebRTC, which is only browser to browser and also requires internet to function. So kind of this has been what the DAT ecosystem has looked like on the web for a while. And recently I was thinking like, I kind of want to play around with something else that isn't out there yet. So with that in mind, I started thinking about Agregore. So throughout kind of late winter, I've been working on this project called Natakanu, which is a peer-to-peer file transfer app for Indigenous groups in Canada. And it's an Electron app. And part of the code was adding support for the Hyper protocol as an Electron protocol handler so that I could load files directly from Hypercore. And what was cool is it was actually not that hard at all. Natakanu. Natakanu. So it's open source. Check it out. It's great. So honestly, it was like less than a dozen lines of code because most of the stuff that I was doing for trying to get all of this that stuff working on the web before, I can now just shove into a protocol handler in Electron and it suddenly worked. And I thought, you know what, this is kind of cool. I think I'm onto something with this protocol handler approach to working with DAT. It was in a module called DAT fetch. Maybe I should go and turn this into like an actual app because I've been mostly messing with the web and that's been kind of limiting because I want like, you know, actual peer-to-peer. I want to have to actually have local first stuff. And another thing I wanted to do, which I wasn't seeing out in the ecosystem, was mixing different protocols together. So I was kind of thinking like, okay, we have all of these competing peer-to-peer protocols. A lot of them are like, oh yeah, we're going to be the protocol, or at least externally it seems like they're going to be the protocol, but they're all actually very different and have different trade-offs, and they're actually better for different use cases. And I was thinking, you know, it'd be nice to kind of mix these together and give developers more options, like say using IPFS for caching static content, which it is very good at, and using Hypercore protocol with hyperdrives for mutable content that's a little bit more private, or say using BitTorrent for just loading contents off of the BitTorrent network, which, you know, BitTorrent is great. It's been around for a while. Why aren't we using it as a web protocol? And then lastly, I wanted to kind of play around with new APIs for interacting with these protocols. So a lot of things like DAT SDK or Beaker's Beaker APIs or the IPFS JavaScript API, they're all like these JavaScript things, and they're very opinionated and they're very tied to kind of like their peer-to-peer protocol and their ecosystem. And I was thinking it'd be cool if we could experiment with something a little bit more webby. And specifically, I was thinking like, how much can we do in the protocol handler level? How much can we do with the fetch API, which is what developers are already using for web apps? So with that in mind, I kind of put together a little prototype and got something out there. And then that's kind of given me an idea of like, what are my actual goals with this project? Like, what am I trying to achieve? So, oh, that's the wrong window. So what are my goals? I think the number one thing that I care about is to just enable local first web apps. And for me, that means kind of like trying to separate or like get rid of as much as possible, just have the most simple API surface I can think of so that developers can just kind of pick it up and then start running with it. And also make that simple API go across protocols as much as possible so that learning one protocol makes it easier to learn another. As well, one thing that I think is really important is actually partnering with projects. So what I really want to do is not just make like this browser for myself, which, you know, obviously it is partially for myself, but I really want to find projects that have a need for this peer-to-peer thing and kind of partner with them and like help them develop something that actually works for their communities or for their use case. And then kind of part of my reasoning for this too is that we should have extendable examples, and whatever people build for their specific use cases should be extendable by others. So for instance, right now, if I want to build an app that's peer-to-peer, it's actually a huge pain in the ass to make something from scratch unless you're going to jump through like a bunch of hoops and learn a ton of development. Like on the legacy web, you know, you have to learn about all of these cloud things and web servers and orchestration and all of that stuff, which we get rid of with this peer-to-peer layer. But even then, actually building your app for the web, having something work on mobile and desktop and all of these crazy environments it's actually a huge learning curve. And if I see an app someone made, I can't just like take it, copy paste some code and have it work in a different context, because it's just so complicated to actually get that initial app started up. So kind of my hope is that if we have these higher level primitives and these more webby APIs, you know, I don't have to worry as much about all of the initial setup. I can just kind of look at what this local first approach did and try to do my own thing. So one of the things too with partnering with projects is figuring out like what they're doing, and then having the tools and patterns they have developed become available to other projects that are doing similar things or things on their own. Like I mentioned before, this Natakanu app, which is file transfer for indigenous groups. My ideal is that, you know, you don't need a contractor to come in and do this complex peer-to-peer stuff for you. Ideally, you have skills in your community so that you can make tools for yourselves and kind of have sovereignty over your own data, and kind of like be able to rely more on your community and have more kind of autonomy rather than having to rely on third parties and third-party expertise. And keeping it simple is part of making that possible. Speaking of simple, I think one thing I really want to do is try to be as minimal as possible with this project. So really, I want to invent as little as possible, which has kind of been my ideology for you know, just development in general. I want to kind of use what's already there and use patterns that already exist instead of creating a bunch of new things that will require new explanations and new training material. This second part, I mean, it's partially minimalism, partially laziness. I was like, you know, why should I bother like doing tabs when Windows will do? So I was like, you know, all these other applications use Windows. Why don't I just ditch this part of the web that's been like so integral to pretty much all web browsers, and then just have Windows? So if you click a link, you just open a new window. And if you want to navigate to a page, you just click on the window using your OS. Also like layout, you use your OS's layout manager. Wow, exciting. Also, I wanted to just get rid of like extra UI. Kind of what you see here is all the UI. There's also like a little drop down with some commands, but generally speaking, there's not much to it. It's just kind of the URL and some basic navigational stuff. One other thing which I thought would be cool, which I haven't implemented yet, is getting rid of bookmarks as a browser concept and thinking of bookmarks as just files. So like, instead of saving a thing to your browser and then having your browser have some internal mechanism for syncing stuff, what if your bookmark was just a file on your file system and you double clicked it and it opened up your web browser? And then if you wanted to put it in a folder, you just put it in a folder. And if you want to move it somewhere, you just put it on a USB stick and then put it on your other computer. So just like, whoa, that's suddenly in the user's hands and in the OS's hands rather than another thing to maintain in a browser and also have opinions about. So that's kind of some of the design approach. Next, kind of the other thing was I want to be open to anything decentralized. So I don't want to focus on just the Hypercore protocol, even though that's probably my favorite. I think it'd be really cool to kind of experiment with things. So kind of next on my roadmap after Hypercore protocol is this new thing called Earthstar by Cinnamon from the, I guess, SSB community. And so they kind of looked at secure scuttlebutt and its structure and some of the places where there were pain points and some of the strengths that it had. And they kind of made this new protocol, and it's totally different from everything else. And I'm really excited to be like, have, you know, a web place to build stuff with Earthstar and also combine it with that. Like say you have an Earthstar app that's distributed through DAT because you can update DAT archives or hyperdrives really easily. Also, I want to support IPFS because, you know, they're a really big player, and we're actually trying to like find a way to do a dev grants with IPFS to work on this other thing that will kind of like benefit IPFS, and then take some of that stuff and put it into Agregore eventually in my spare time, but just kind of like have reusable pieces and also try to get the same stuff that works in Agregore into other environments. I'm still a huge fan of BitTorrents, and I really want to do BitTorrent stuff in the web. So like loading torrents as web pages, we'll see how it goes. Blockchain for payment stuff. I know this is probably like super controversial, you know, boiling the oceans, but honestly, I think like blockchain for payments has some advantages, namely that it's nice that people don't have to have like legal addresses and be inside countries that are allowed to do monetary stuff. Like if you're in some, let's say, country that isn't on the US's good books, it's a huge pain in the ass to participate financially on a global market. And honestly, you know, I want to be pragmatic and be like, if blockchain people want to have payments, then, you know, let's just do it and use one of the existing standards rather than inventing a whole bunch of ones that are now tied with individual peer-to-peer protocols. And of course, I'm open to whatever your favorite protocol is. So anything decentralized, just open up a GitHub issue, be like, yeah, I have like this thing I want to just play around with and get integrated in there, and then let's figure it out and add it in, and then just mix it all in the soup and just have a whole mess of decentralized things. So send those GitHub issues. As well, I was thinking that it'd be nice to rely more on extensions. So honestly, extensions are really cool for web browsers, and I think that they give the opportunity to put more features of your browser in userland. So if Aggregore does almost nothing, you can take it, add a few extensions that you want for your use case, repackage it, and now you have like a more fully featured browser that does all of the things you want. And I find that really exciting. As well, one of the benefits of using Fetch for all of the peer-to-peer stuff is that Fetch is available in every single context. So you can use peer-to-peer APIs inside service workers, inside extensions, inside pretty much any context. So this could give us a whole new set of browser extensions that make use of peer-to-peer stuff. Like imagine the bookmark scenario I said before, but this is like a bookmark sync that uses Hypercore protocol. And then I link my two, I like take Gateway and I take Agregore and I scan a QR code, and suddenly I'm exchanging bookmarks between the two. Or say I'm working on like a local service discovery thing, and I, again, just have the extension and it's doing all of the fancy browser stuff for me. Or like I right click something and I want to save the web page to peer-to-peer archive for later. It kind of opens the door for a lot of cool things that exist kind of on a higher level than just a web page, but are still kind of applications. Lastly, I think it'd be cool if we could load extensions from peer-to-peer protocols. So say I want to distribute an extension instead of having like a proprietary app store, like Google's extension thing or Firefox's extension thing. I can just load it from a peer-to-peer protocol. And what's cool is I can get updates that are distributed over local first networks. So you can potentially have someone author an extension inside the web browser, inside a peer-to-peer web browser, then install it into their browser, and then go like to some remote village and then have them install it directly from your device, and then come back later with an update and have them propagate it out. So it kind of enables like this whole new way of application distribution outside of just regular web pages. Yeah, and then lastly, like I'm glad that Comrade mentions mesh networks, because I'm super into it. And sadly, this is like a little bit less of a browser concern and more of a protocols concern. But I think ideally in the future, I'd want protocols working over ad hoc networks so that I can go somewhere with a laptop or a phone and then just mesh directly with someone else's laptop or phone, rather than having to go through these third-party things or setting up distributed hash tables. And pretty much, what like Bluetooth could be a cool way of connecting to people, and whatever other mesh protocols, like Apple has their own proprietary one. Why don't we use that? Anyway, so that's kind of what the plan was. Let's quickly take a look at what we have right now. I'm going to play with Fire and do a live demo. Okay, so obviously this testing is happening inside Agregore. So we can go to the home page. This is kind of what you see when you boot it up. So we can load stuff off of the Hyper protocol. We have support for DNS, and this is using the existing, there's some bugs when I go too fast. There's support for the existing DNS system, so I don't have to have these messy URLs all the time. And as well, we've got a fetch API for interacting with things. So I've just got a bunch of stuff in my, well, here. I can kind of show you how to do a fetch of the current page. And live code. Okay, so here I loaded the current web page, which is a Hyper protocol, or I can actually do the same thing, but pass in the full URL. Or is this like legible? Should I make it smaller? Okay, cool. Readable. So here I'm loading a web page, but what's cool is you can actually create hyperdrives with the fetch interface. So I've got a little bit of a pre-made command here. So fetch is an interface for doing HTTP requests. And so in HTTP requests, there's a few pieces. There's a URL, there's some headers, and there's some body. So potentially some content for the body. And then what you get back is a response, which has a status code, some headers, and a body again. So what we already have, and Beaker has this too, and I'm pretty sure Gateway has this too, is a get interface for hyperdrives. So we can get content out, and that's just something that exists. So in addition, we now have a put method. So I can say, if I can get a file, I should be able to put one in. So under the hood, Agregore uses the DAT SDK. And what that means is that there's this concept called named drives or named hypercores. And so if I give a name that's not a hypercore key and that's not a DNS name, that gets used as kind of like a name for generating a new drive. So I can put any name here, like hello.conf, and then this will create a new drive. So when I post this, what happens is under the hood, or here, status code, I think it was. Oh my God, live coding. Never. Always a mistake. Wait, what am I? Yeah, Icarus flew too close to the sun. And now my browser crashed. All right, no problem. All part of the plan. Totally didn't just mess up. Let me quickly get a new window going. See, the demo gods did not smile upon me today, but that's okay. We don't need their smiles. Okay, so bam. So what I just did was I sent a post request to this URL, and now if I copy paste that URL, I've actually got, oops, I've got a new archive. So I don't know if you can see that, but that says hello world. Now, what I can also do is create an index.html, which will render whenever I load the page. And so since, you know, I'm really masochistic, let's just live code a little bit of HTML and see if it works. Oh. All right, so if I refresh this and go to the root, we've now got that empty page. We can have some text. And this doesn't have Beaker's fancy live reloading, but it works. Cool. All right. Let's go back to the, oh yeah, so also this has some really basic browser features, which is like, I've been wanting to use this as just my browser. So for that, I needed like some essential features, which was the autocomplete for URLs and find in page, because find in page is like, I didn't know how much I used it until I didn't have it. And that's about it. Anyway, so that was the demo. The fetch interface is like super simple right now. It's just get and put, and there's a special thing for dealing with the index.json file, which might need to get changed. And also a special way to get directory listings as a JSON array. But other than that, it's not really inventing too much from what is there already. So in the near future, kind of what I'm hoping to do is get the hyperdrive fetch to more getting blobs. So there's a question in the chat, getting blobs. You can get blobs. It's just fetch. So when you do the get, you can either get it as an array buffer or as text or parse it as JSON. So if you have a JSON file, there's actually, it's easier to deal with JSON. As well, I think you can post JSON more easily, which is cool. So in the near future, I'm hoping to add a little bit more to the hyperdrive fetch API, figuring out how to get metadata and also how to deal with extension messages, because that's super important to me. I want to implement that bookmarks as file thing because I think it'd be super sci-fi or lo-fi, I don't know, and get the Earthstar protocol in there so that we can start playing around with what it means to have multiple protocols in one place. So you might be wondering, how do I get involved? And please get involved, because the more the merrier. There's a to-do list, which is just like a giant roadmap with a bunch of items. A bunch of them are finished, a bunch of them aren't finished. If you're interested in working on anything, just open up a GitHub issue, or if you want to just kind of shoot the shit or discuss random ideas, just ping me in my DMs, either on Twitter or Matrix or Discord or Telegram, or I'm not on Cabal that much yet, but pretty much anywhere. And let's just like think about what it means to make a peer-to-peer web, what it means to interface with this peer-to-peer stuff using a webby interface, and also how can we get this useful for actual projects and useful for people that actually want to make stuff that is local first and benefits from local first. I don't know if I'm over time, but thank you so much for listening, and yeah, keep fighting the power, etc.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mob. All right. Well, coming up next is building a network library with James and Dennis. It's about to start in a couple of minutes, actually. So see you there.